What's up, you guys? This is Devin from CenturyFX Studios, back with another video. And today we're going to be talking about Nikon because Nikon has just announced, or Petapixel, or I just read an article on Petapixel that said Nikon is about to come out with a sub $1,000 camera. And I think it's true. And the reason being is because what has been done will be done again. I agree with Christina when he said that, Nikon and Canon are like two legs on one animal. One leg moves and the other leg moves right behind it. It's one after the other. They're going to be tethered together because they are in so steep competition with each other. It's just the way the market has gone for cameras years and years and years, and that's not that much competition for Nikon and Canon, except Sony, of course. But that's another book page all in itself. But you have to think about what the companies have been doing as of late. It's all been about, and I agree with Christina when he said this again, full frame. You have to understand why people go to full frame instead of APS-C or Micro Four Thirds or mirrorless. Because what has been done will be done again. Think about the point and shoot cameras. They're very, very small sensor cameras. Think about the old, I think they still use camcorders because they still have a niche as far as a full-fledged video camera, and a lot of manufacturers like Sony and Nikon can't give you that full. They're just now coming out with cameras that record more than 30 minutes or so. But you have to think about it this way. Camcorders have a niche. They're still small sensor cameras, but you don't see a lot of people using them as much as you see people using Sonys and Canons and Nikons as far as their DSLR system and their mirrorless system. So you have to think about what has been done will be done again. I don't think anything is going to change as far as the industry and the way it goes. The cell phone was the biggest, like I guess, needle in the haystack, if you will, because technology grows so fast. And cell phones grew so fast that almost nobody could have seen them going the way they were until the iPhone came out. And it was like, okay, we understand that the smaller sensor cameras and point and shoots are going away. Now everybody's up to this mirrorless. Everybody was jumping on the mirrorless bandwagon. I guess it's more than just a bandwagon. It's a real thing now. Since Sony came and washed the market of all the lovers of DSLRs, now everybody's loving mirrorless. All of my students, Devin, mirrorless. I got this mirrorless camera. Mirrorless this. All my friends, mirrorless this, that, and the other. People love mirrorless cameras. I've even seen Sonys at political press conferences and stuff like that. So I agree with Christina as what has been done will be done again, and Nikon and Canon are just two legs of the same animal. Things of that nature always happens with Canon and Nikon. One person makes a low-powered or low-costing mirrorless camera like the Canon EOS RP. Nikon did it. And it kind of relates to how popular and how successful the companies are in general, because Sony is that niche company that has a lot going for it. So it kind of pushed the curve, and now Canon came down, and then Nikon came down with their price of their full frame cameras. Because Nikon and Canon full frame cameras have been upwards past $3,000 for the past at least 7 to 10 years. 5Ds all been retailing at about $3,000 until Sony was like, oh, well, we can retail a full frame camera that is easier to use, has more technology, easier to post things to Instagram, easier to do this, easier, more software for $1,000, $1,500 cheaper, and a lot of more people are going to want to buy it. That's why the A7 III did so well, and now the Canon EOS RP is doing so well, because the EOS RP the EOS RP is decent, but it's nowhere near, like Christina said, the M50, the APS-C size mirrorless 4K, the first Canon 4K mirrorless camera, I believe. They're all doing great. Why? Because they're under $2,000. I don't think people buy cameras so much for the specs. They love specs. Of course, people love specs. That's what gets you in the door. But the price will make or break you. And you might want the biggest spec camera out. You might want the biggest 5D in the world, but if you can't afford it, you just won't buy it. People just won't buy it if they can't afford it. They might want those specs forever in their brain, but they will not buy it if they don't have the cost. Now, since the cost has come down on all full frame cameras, full frame makes way more sense than any APS-C sensor would. They don't even make the 7D anymore, which is one of the best APS-C sensors, because the specs and the price that they're retailing that 7D at, it just doesn't make sense nowadays. I think that's why they stopped the 7D. The prices and specs just doesn't make sense. They have so many other cameras that are coming out in that range of price that there's no use in coming out with a 7D Mark III with the same specs as what 24 megapixel sensor. What was y'all gonna do, Canon? Is that what y'all gonna do with a 12 frames a second? Everybody knew it was coming. And is no way in the world with the A7 III out that can do probably more than what you were planning for the 7D Mark III to do. And then the Nikon has their equivalent is it Z5 or Z4 or whatever, their low price mirrorless full frame camera. There's no way you're gonna come out with a crop frame sensor at the same price and expect people to still go there, because people don't necessarily need high frames a second like the 7D was meant to have. They don't necessarily need that. Most consumers don't shoot at such a high frames per second. I think 6 frames a second is more than enough for most people. 8 frames a second is way more than enough, and that's what the 7D Mark I had. So the 7D Mark III was supposed to have like maybe 15 frames a second. I don't know, but here's the thing: Nikon and Canon are tethered. They just most of their cameras look almost exactly or function almost exactly the same, except Nikon is a little bit more on dynamic range. Canon is a little bit better on video. It's been that way for a while now. And now that they're coming out with this sub $1,000 camera, it's not unexpected for me. It's not unexpected for me, because I know that Nikon has to compete. Nikon is kind of like, it's been around for a long time, but Nikon is kind of the underdog in all of this. Nikon is not necessarily the best. Sony used to be the underdog, but now since it's A7 III, I think that Sony is one of the more top dogs now. They kind of solidified themselves as a staple. People are looking for the A7S III to come out. Everybody's looking for Sony now. Everybody's looking for Sony, and that's what really Sony wanted, and that's what they got. Now, since people are looking for Sony, people are not so much looking for Nikon. They feel long and old in the tooth, Nikon and Canon. Even though Canon is still one of the most popular brands of cameras because of their entire infrastructure and the way they sell cameras and their marketing and all this other stuff, and color science and all these intangibles that Canon brings, like lenses and lens quality. Canon has their own niche in the market, but Sony has definitely solidified their own spot. Now Nikon has to respond with something cheaper, because I don't think Nikon has the clout that Canon has. They don't have the clout that Sony has. They don't have that level of precedence. Even though they are stable, they don't have their precedence. So they got to come out to compete. They got to come out lower. They might come out with it for $900, because nobody can afford these new lenses that are coming out for the mirrorless systems. They're high quality. I've heard that some of the the Canon lenses that are coming out for the R system is some of the sharpest lenses anybody's seen on the planet. But nobody can afford that new glass for the new system. They have to wait until everything trickles down, the price comes down, all this other stuff. Used lenses come on the market, because lenses don't really lose their value. All that stuff. People have to actually buy into the system for it to recycle down to the masses. And so they won't really get that retail cost out of all their cameras. But nevertheless, you have Nikon, who is coming out with this camera, and the camera is going to have some watered down specs. Nobody who's a professional is going to want this camera. Maybe as a B-roll camera, maybe as a secondary camera, but I don't think nobody's going to want this. They're calling it the Z3. I don't think people are going to really buy into this camera, because there's so many cheap mirrorless cameras on the market. And one more thing that Jay Christina said, he said something about the lenses solidifying especially pro photographers into the system. So if you get them by the lenses, then they will just keep buying into the system. And I agree with that too. I think that if you get a camera that comes out and has, people love the lenses, they can afford the lenses, you have an infrastructure for lenses, people start to buy those lenses, it's kind of hard to get out of the brand. Not only do lenses not lose value, but you start to invest. It takes time to invest into those lenses. Whether you're making payments, whether you're getting it as a lump sum, cash straight out, you have to work with that. You get used to the raw files, you get used to a lot of things. Now, the last thing that Jay Christina said was basically that you got to understand that everybody's going full frame. And yes, everybody's going full frame. There is no use, I'm going back to it again, no use for 7Ds, even though I love the 7D like no tomorrow. No use for your 7Ds anymore. You're not really your 80Ds, but they're going to probably compartmentalize that and make everything a 90D with 7D Mark III specs, that kind of thing with Canon. But your D500s on the Nikon side, even though that's a masterful camera, there's no need for a camera at that price point with those kinds of specs just minusculely updated. Like, you can't just come out with a slightly beefier 7D Mark II and a 7D Mark III at $1,000, almost $2,000. retailing with a lens. You can't do that because you got mirrorless cameras that are full frame, better in low light, all this other stuff with more practical settings like, or practical features like 6 frames a second, all this stuff. People do not need your 10 frames and your 12, 20 frames a second, and people don't want to go through all those pictures. It's a responsibility of having a 10, 15 frames a second camera. That is a definite responsibility. And then think about it. With the 7D being a DSLR, it's not going to have a really good silent shooting mode. No one in the world has come up with a completely silent DSLR. I've never seen it. Now, you have mirror lockup and different technology, but with my almost 12, 13 years of shooting, I've never seen a completely silent DSLR. Now, Sony has come up with completely silent mirrorless cameras from your A7R2s. That's the one I use. But you got to think about it. Think about it practically. What do people want? They want new and innovation and cheaper cameras. And since full frame is something that's been out for a long time, and the reason full frame became popular is because people were able to match the price point with the quality of the camera. They said, back in the early days, back in the early Kodak days, early 1900s, late 1800s, they're talking about, okay, well, why is 35 millimeter the standard? Well, 35 millimeter for the price and the quality was what, the powers to be, what the companies wanted at the time. We can settle for this price with this frame size for a mass amount of cameras. So you got to think about it that way. What has been done will be done again. I'm done with CenturyFX Studios, guys. Thanks for watching. I know this went a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I wanted to get back and just talk about cameras for once and stop being out in the field, because being out in the field is hard and breaking equipment. Just to try to get you guys these videos. So keep watching and stay tuned for the next episode.